It's that time of year again where I think we need to take a quick look at how the markets are faring and what's on the horizon. So I'm offering not one, but 3 short podcasts this week, each taking a view on what's driving the core shipping markets and where the opportunities and risks lie ahead. Now, you can listen to Tankers and Dry Bulk, where you found this podcast, or via lloydslist.com, but this edition is going to unpack the box sector for you. The container lines have begun reporting their first quarter results, and there are strong improvements on the previous quarter. That's the good news. But that ground has been gained on the back of disruptions to sailing through the Red Sea, which has soaked up capacity and forced rates up, improving earnings but increasing costs for the shipping lines. For now, that looks set to continue, but with a glut of new capacity still coming out of the yards, concerns remain that even rerouting won't absorb it all. So, to guide you through the current state of affairs in the market and the outlook for the quarters ahead, I'm going to hand you over to Lloyd's List Containers editor James Baker and Xeneta's chief analyst Peter Sand.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Great to have Peter Sand here joining us today to give us a bit of insight into what's happening in the wider container market. Peter, we're coming into, we're 1 month down on the second quarter. First quarter results have started to emerge now. So 6 months on from when we talked at the end of last year, when things were looking pretty grim for the container lines, the market's significantly changed in both demand, volumes, rates. I guess the point now is we know the reasons for that with what's been happening in the Red Sea and the geopolitics around the world. But I guess what we're looking at now is just trying to get a sense of, now that we're getting through the second quarter, what next, where now? What's your sort of just general overall feel for the market? And particularly now that we've got the Trans-Pacific rates, contract rates have been settled. What are you seeing out there? What's your feel for the market?
I think the carriers were handed the biggest Christmas present at all once the Red Sea crisis came about. But I must say that the unboxing of it have been quite different to watch from the financial reports that we have seen from some of the carriers going out now and some that will show them a little bit later. But I must say that it had once again favored the bold, in the sense that those playing the spot market to the largest extent have reaped the benefit full scale, while those that have played it perhaps more conservative, or at least set their business around a different composition of the volumes that they carry, where they're perhaps overweighting the long-term contracts. It has been pretty devastating for them, I guess, seeing a first quarter that saw spot market rates jump by 200% and long-term contracts signed right here, right now for Transpac, but also with some significant delay into Europe, not really reflecting that crazy market and basically covering to some extent only their extra cost from rerouting around the Cape of Good Hope. So I think it's really a mixed bag in terms of what the kind of benefits or the lack of it that carriers have reaped through the first quarter. And looking into to what comes next, well, I think everyone is now preparing themselves for the high season and for third quarter, because that's like the next ghost on the horizon. What will it bring around? We have seen a record high filling factor as measured by our partner Marine Benchmark on Far East to Europe. So if the fleet is really that fully utilized, how many more ships do we need to actually also move the volume of cargo that are set to find way via the ocean shipping supply chains in Q3? I think that's probably the biggest conundrum right now. Will we see a continued drop in spot rates, not reflected in long terms, or what kind of power play will we see in
some of those high load factors that we're seeing at the moment do seem to be slightly artificially generated, with having a lot of blank sailings going on. I'm trying to get a sense for what demand is really like out there, because I mean, Maersk was speaking this morning. We're recording this on Thursday. But saying, there's been no big GDP sort of drivers for increased growth. Is it a matter of inventories being restocked, or is it potentially people bringing forward their orders because they know things are taking a lot longer to get around, and we could end up with a sort of overstocked, over-inventoried situation?
Yeah, I think it's very much the latter that you suggest, that comes closest to what we see right now. I also see this fear of losing out in terms of capacity from shippers across the board. So when something like this hits the fan, they often react with moving more cargo faster than they would otherwise expect. That's of course also bringing up the filling factor, but also eventually filling the inventories faster than they would otherwise do, because they now have much more floating storage. So unless we really see demand picking up, I mean, Europe just narrowly escaped its recession following 2 quarters of negative GDP growth, right? So it's not really a powerful economy pumping fast forward in Europe. We're looking towards North America once again, and I guess that's why we also see a record high filling factor on the Transpac into US West Coast, right? Where supply have grown by almost 10% when compared to last year, but demand when adjusted for the miles and boxes moved up by some 14%. So there's merit to the higher levels also, not only the ripple effect from Red Sea, but also real demand. But I think if we are also looking at the North American continent as a whole, one, I would say, wild card going into not only the elections later in the year, but certainly also a bit of wild card into what we may see from disruptions that is likely to appear on the US East Coast later in the year. Will those boxes find their way to the West Coast? Will they find their way through Mexico, the fastest growing trade on Earth right now? Or will we see Canada step in as they have done before? I think you can imagine every scenario, not with with an even likelihood, but I think carriers need to be aware that shippers prefer to have options, and I think many shippers are trying those options out now before it really gets crunch time. So I think that's like a bit of the game that we see right now, with cargo spread on different and perhaps in the views of some, odd trade lanes. But those that are following China Mexico, for instance, know that trade already grew by 34% last year. So having it up by 50.9% in the first 2 months of this year shouldn't surprise no one. But of course, then again, there's always some clouds in the sky. Some of you may know that the Mexican president have also announced a hike on tariffs, also targeting, potentially impacting also those goods coming from China. You never know for sure, but even though your trend is your friend and we see high rates, volatility also a lot on that trade, keep your eyes out for the implementation of that tariff, because it may be the break, it may not be. To me, at least, that's an interesting wildcard to watch out for in coming months.
The maritime industry is facing a pivotal challenge: decarbonising the existing fleet. To address this, Lloyd's Register has been evaluating what this means for shipping stakeholders. Lloyd's Register's Engine Retrofit Report provides a comprehensive overview of fleet and technology readiness to transition to alternative fuels, including methanol and ammonia. This report considers the primary regulatory drivers, shipyard retrofit capacity and capability, as well as the importance of human factors and training. You can download the report at www.lr.org/ERR.
Interesting you're saying about the US market, because, I mean, yesterday was the official start of the 2024-25 contract period. You know, we're getting full ships sailing across. We've got additional capacity on that. And yet the contracts seem to have been signed at, you know, an improvement, but not a massive hike from last year, and last year was pretty damn low to start up with. What's that telling us? And what figures are you seeing out there?
I think it's putting a lot of color to an otherwise black and white picture out there. And the color that I'm seeing on the painting here is that we are still in a structural overcapacity. The Red Sea is an exception, right? So we are still seeing carriers in need for those contract volumes. So they are seeing a high spot market, but they do not dare to go all the way, pushing it too far and too hard with their preferred shippers, right? So they are not going for a long-term, whether that's 6 months or 3 months or 1 year contract with their ideal customers, right? They are scared to push them away because they know that if essential cargo is picked up by a competitor in the market, it will be even more terrible for them once we get that, say, normalized market in inverted commas, with the Red Sea no longer a problem. So we have seen shippers not calling the bluff, because there hasn't really been a bluff. Carriers have been looking at a spot market, but they have also been, say, fairly unable to take advantage of that once you look at the long-term contract rates. Often they move with a certain lag, but there's been this understanding in the market that this too will pass, and this too will find a next normal. With the capacity growing over the past 2 or 3 years in nominal terms, the only thing really keeping at least most carriers profitable right now is the fact that if you adjust the ton with the miles, then you get something really working for you. So I think when you compare rates on the long-term market, also what we can see on the Sonata platform right now on say China to US East Coast and West Coast, they are signed right now at a level that is up from where they were signing them last year, but it's not like a huge 100% upwards movement, right? We're talking about rates on the U.S. West Coast around $2,000, and where we see also those coming into say force last year was around 1,800 or something like that, right? So all in, including terminal handling charges for destination on the Sonata platform, right? So you've seen an upward movement, and you've definitely seen carriers escape the doldrums, but whether they have seen the extent of which they could benefit from the high spot market, I think yes is the reply to that.
It brings us to a interesting point about the capacity that we've got coming in, and we'll finish with this one. But I've heard from 2 container lines this week, Lloyd, saying that this extra capacity in the market has been useful because it's allowed the system to keep working while we've had this crisis, and we need to have some buffer in the market. Then I've heard from Maersk saying that this is still the elephant in the room, and they're really worried about the overcapacity that is coming. The Red Sea is sucking it up and absorbing it at the moment, but we're still growing at 2 to 3% per quarter, and demand is not growing at that rate. And so when the Red Sea clears eventually, this is going to leave us with an awful lot of capacity. Now, there are arguments that scrapping will go up and you need it for CII and so on, but where's your take on those 2 extremes?
I think we've only seen one disruption that beats the current one, and that's the COVID years. And for comparison, we saw Far East to Europe around $15,000 per FEU back in 2022, and we see rates on the same trade peaking at $5,000 this time around. Far East to Med at $6,000. So this disruption, as sizable and disruptive as it is, basically wreaking havoc on the busiest trade lane of them all, only brings you 1/3 of the COVID disruptions, right? That is, of course, because of the excess capacity in the market, because of carriers' fortunate and swift action also to update their networks to go round the Cape of Good Hope. A mammoth task, but definitely something that shippers can also cherish. I mean, they would rather pay $1,000 in the spot market, but as compared to the crazy COVID years where they paid 15,000, I think that's probably why they have also just eaten into these cost levels, saying that okay, the most important part for us is actually resilience in supply chains. We do not get predictability because reliability is appallingly low. It was already coming into the crisis, but I mean, you can have any transit time presented and you will never get it, right? But apparently, again, it's not top of the agenda right now, at least for the time being, and for shippers or carriers. It may be a different conversation for those talking to Gemini alliance partners right now, where they're promising 90% when everything is up and running nicely. I wonder if we will ever live to see that day, but at least we'll keep track of that. But I'm more into the fundamental. I call it structural overcapacity right now, and if we measure the amount of ships right now alone this year, we are expecting 2.3 million new build tonnage to be fed into to the market, with only perhaps a couple of 100,000 left out, right? So 7.8% of say pure TEU growth. That's what we're expecting at Sonata, set against the demand growth somewhere between 2-3, perhaps a little bit more than that, but definitely not in the range of 7 or 8, just to balance out the market inflow of new ships. So I think the carriers got their work cut out once we get on the other side of Red Sea. But I guess that's just the wildest joker around. How long will it take for that to finally pass too? I guess I can't say either.
Okay, well, that is where we're going to leave the box sector for now. But as I mentioned at the start, there are 2 more editions of this mini market outlook series for you to feast your ears on this week. For Dry Bulk, our markets editor Rob Wilmington talks to BIMCO's chief analyst Niels Rasmussen. And for a view on tankers, I sat down with BRS research chief Andrew Wilson. You can find those editions where you found this one, or head directly to lloydslist.com. Thank you for listening.